Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be talking about the Book of Ether. We're going to be jumping into chapter 1, just kind of going along with Come Follow Me for this week. This first chapter's got a lot of great things in it, and it's kind of the springboard for the rest of the Book of Ether. And so you probably were in Mormon chapter 9, and then you got to Ether, and you're like, whoa, this is not this is not right after Mormon, at least chronologically. And that's because Mormon's son Moroni took this record and placed it in here so that we could have the record of Ether and his people. And so this is completely separate from the Book of Mormon before it and the Book of Moroni after, at least chronologically. This takes place before. As we read here in this part right here, um, Moroni abridges the writings of Ether, so he kind of shortens them from the 24 plates that we're going to talk about. We learn about Ether's genealogy and the language of the people called the Jaredites. Now, if you remember at the very, very beginning of the Book of Mormon, at the title page, it talks about the two people, the Nephites and the Lamanites, as well as the people of Jared. And so that's really what we're going to learn about in the Book of Ether is that their origin story, and by the end, their eventual collapse, and what caused that. And so, but first we have to start with the beginning of that story, and that's what happens in chapter 1. And so it starts off with this superscription, and just want to kind of break down this chapter. So I wrote some notes here. Um, you can kind of break it into 4 parts. There's different ways you can do this, but this is something I found helpful. But the first couple of verses, the first 5 verses, just talk about how Moroni provides an introduction to his abridgment of the 24 plates of ether. These plates are first mentioned in the book of Omni and then later expanded in the book of Mosiah when Ammon and the people find the people of Limhi, and the people of Limhi tell them, hey, we found these plates. We were looking for Zarahemla, but actually we found this place littered with a bunch of bones. So you can go and you can read about that in Mosiah and how they found those plates. But Moroni is actually now putting those plates into the record. And so really, really cool. And so he talks about how this record actually goes back all the way to the creation of Adam, and he's going to get into that. But he decides that he's only going to abridge the account of things starting at the tower onward. And so the next chunk is the biggest chunk in here, verses 6 through 33, is the genealogy of Ether, all the way back to Jared. Um, and so we're going to read about that. We're going to learn about Jared and his family and how they pray that they are not affected by the confounding of the languages at the tower. If you remember in Genesis chapter 11, this is where it happens in the Bible story. And Jared and his family are there at that time. And so you can go and you can compare what happened to those people versus what happened to Jared. And so the Lord has compassion on them, and they ask the Lord where He wants them to go. And in the very last part of the chapter, the Lord gives them direction and promises them blessings. And so, just like we talked about in this first part, Moroni introduces the record. He talks about the ancient inhabitants who were destroyed. So we know that they're destroyed at this point in the story. Um, and we're going to hear about their origin and eventually how they got destroyed. And so he took his account from the 24 plates of Limhi, and he calls it the Book of Ether. So that's where we get our titles, the Book of Ether. And so he talks about the first part of this record, and he's reading through it, and he's looking at what to abridge, and he sees, okay, they started with the beginning of the world, the creation, and of Adam, even from the time of the Great Tower. So if you click on some of these different things, you can see Genesis chapter 11, where it happens in the Bible. But he decides that he is not going to cover everything that is from Genesis 1 through 10. And so he starts basically in Genesis 11. So that's a good comparison point in the Bible where you can take and compare. But he decides that he's not going to include those things, and he's going to start from the time of the Tower of Babel. And so, but he lets us know they are had upon the plates, and whoso findeth them, the same will have power that he may get the full account. And so Joseph Smith talks about how there was a sealed portion, as well as all these different things that were on it. And really, really interesting stuff. And so one day we'll be able to see these accounts and to be able to have them. But right as of now, we do not have this. It was not made available to us. Um, and so he's letting us know he's not going to make a full account, but part of the account he gives from the tower until they were destroyed. So we're going to learn about the Tower of Babel all the way until their destruction. So that's kind of the first part. This is Moroni's introduction, and now he's like, all right, let's get into the account. And so to begin the account, he's going to start with Ether, and he's going to kind of do like a backwards genealogy. So he's going to start with Ether, who was the last prophet of the people, and he's going to go backwards. He's going to talk about who he was a descendant of, and it goes all the way back to our good man Jared, who the story is going to pick up on. And so he includes this whole genealogy, and something that's really cool about this genealogy is that all of these people are included in the text. And so I went through and did some work on where these people are. And so if you want to learn more about Ether, you specifically need to go to chapters 12 through 15 because he's the last one. And in reverse order, you can see people that are briefly mentioned, like Coriantor, who's Ether's father, some that are mentioned a little bit more, that are a little more prominent in the text. Like some of these, for example, you can read about and you can learn more about. Most of these just are very, very, very brief and aren't mentioned very much, but they are part of the story and how it continues on. And so you see these cycles of some are righteous, some are wicked, all the way back to Jared. And so if you can look at these references and you can study these different people and see which ones were righteous, which ones were wicked. But I think it's really interesting that they included this genealogy. And I think there's a lot more to it. I know sometimes we're kind of tempted to just skip kind of the genealogies and kind of move on and kind of not include that, but just consider why this was added and just think about that. One of the ones to point out here is Shiblon. So when you actually get to the text later on, he's included in Ether chapter 11. You're going to see that his name is actually Shiblam, but also referred to as Shiblon in different translations. So that's really the only one that's different, and there's been some confusion about it, but it's just how it's translated. But Shiblon and Shiblam are the same person in that chapter. And so some of these different people, you get to learn all about them. But these are all some of the characters that you're going to see throughout the Book of Ether. And so really cool stuff. And so I highly encourage you to learn more about these people as you go. And I think which ones are peaceful, which ones are rebellious, which ones are evil, and learn about this cycle. And so there's that genealogy. And so as we kind of wrap up the genealogy, it picks up with the story of Jared right here. In comparison with Genesis 11 and some of the footnotes. And so, it talks about Jared at the time when the Lord confounded the language of the people. And so there's this big confounding going on at the Tower of Babel because the Tower of Babel was built so that the people could kind of make a shortcut to heaven almost. They didn't want to do things the Lord's way, and they were like, well, let's just build a staircase to heaven. And so they tried to do that, and the Lord was not happy. And so in a solution to that, the Lord confounded the people's language. Because at that time, everyone spoke the same language. But after he confounded it, the people couldn't understand each other anymore. And it created a lot of confusion. And so in the wake of this confusion, we learn about Jared and the brother of Jared and their family. And Jared asks his brother, he's like, hey, can you cry to the Lord that he won't confound us so that we can understand each other's words? And Jared, or the brother of Jared, goes and he does that, right? And there's this interesting phrase that we're going to see a couple different times, is this phrase, the Lord had compassion upon Jared. And because he had compassion, he didn't confound their language. And so that's the first thing that they pray for, is say, please don't confound our family. We have been faithful. We've been doing everything that you've asked us to do. Please don't confound us. And he grants that to him through his compassion, his mercy. And so after they receive that, Jared says to a brother again, it's like, please ask him to turn his anger away from the people who are our friends. And the brother of Jared does so, and the Lord also has compassion upon their friends and their family, that they aren't also not confounded. And so he's prayed for his family and for his friends, that they aren't confounded, and that is granted unto them. This next part talks a little bit about the third thing they ask the Lord. And so the brother of Jared's already asked for two specific things, and they've been granted. And so now it's go and inquire of the Lord whether he will drive us out of the land. And if he drive us out of the land, cry unto him whether we shall go. And the brother of Jared's like, and Jared also are just like, well, what do we do now? Everyone's been confounded and starting to scatter. We need to ask the Lord where he wants us to go. If he wants us to stay here or if he wants us to go somewhere else. And I love this right here where he says, and who knoweth but that the Lord will carry us forth into a land which is choice above all the earth. And if it so be, let us be faithful unto the Lord that we may receive it. They have this understanding that if they want a choice land, they have to be faithful to the Lord so that they can receive it. And so I just love the humility and the understanding of these people, that they know that if they want to receive something that's better than what they have, they need to be faithful. A lot of really cool principles there. And so the brother Jared goes and he cries to the Lord. And just like the other times, he has compassion upon them. The Lord has compassion. He's like, all right, here's my answer. And this is kind of the last part of the chapter. That's going to help us going into the next chapter. He has compassion upon them, and this is his response. After they've asked, hey, Lord, where do we go? What are we going to do? We've been faithful. What do you want us to go? And so he says, go to and gather thy flocks, also the seeds, and thy families. So go and gather all your material possessions and all of your families. And when you've done this, so when you've gathered everything, go at the head of them down into the valley which is northward, and there I will meet thee, and I will go before thee into a land which is choice above all the lands of the earth. And so that hope they had in verse 38 of maybe the Lord will give us a choice land, it's better than what we have now. It seems to be that the Lord is going to grant that to them at this point. And he promises them that if they go into this valley northward, he will meet them there, and will go before them. And I love that principle, because we see it in different instances through these footnotes, that the Lord is going to go before their face and he's going to protect them and guide them to that promised land. He's not just going to say, all right, good luck, try and find it yourself, but he's going to show them the way. And that's just a really, really cool concept. And so he promises them that he's going to give them this promised land. But not only is he going to give them this promised land, but he's going to, when they're there, bless them and their seed. And he wants them to raise up seed unto him and the seed of thy brother. And he's going to make them into a great nation. That's something that's very, very particularly important for these people, is they want to have their posterity become a great nation. And I like that principle, is because I think all of us want our children and our families to grow up into a great nation, to become righteous, to everyone to follow God. And so I think that promise really motivates them to go to the promised land, knowing that their seed will one day become a great nation. But not only a great nation, but there shall be none greater than the nation which I shall raise up unto me of thy seed. That's a powerful promise, because you think about all the other nations that God has raised up, but saying that there should be none greater than the one I raise up unto thy seed. That's a powerful promise. And he says, I will do this because this long time you have cried unto me. And he explains why he does it. And I think that that's cool. The Lord doesn't just bless him with these things, but he says, I do this because you've cried this long time unto me. I think about another Book of Mormon example with Ether, that Ether spent all day praying that he could receive a remission of his sins. And at the end of the day, after he'd been praying all day, he had received that remission because of his diligence in crying unto the Lord. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that if we pray all day that's going to give us a better answer, but it just shows his humility and his diligence in crying unto the Lord, having that faith that if he continues to cry, continues to petition the Lord, it'll show the Lord that this is something he really wants and it's important to him and his family. And the Lord recognizes his effort and is going to bless him immensely for it. And so I wanted to leave you with some takeaways, just a major concept, that the Lord will bless and direct those who come to him in faith, trusting in him completely. The brother of Jared was highly favored of the Lord, and he trusted the Lord completely and always put his trust in him. And that's a very important concept for us to understand. These themes and these ideas, that those things that we ask of the Lord in faith and righteousness will be granted. And we got to make sure we ask in faith. We must trust in the Lord fully and completely. Something I was thinking about with this is just like, what are some things we can learn about Christ or learn about the Lord in this chapter? Well, we know that the Lord will direct his righteous people, and that the Lord desires to have compassion on and bless those who trust in him. The Lord went before the Jaredites and led them to the promised land. That's something we're going to see throughout this book, is how he leads them to the promised land and how he leads them while they're there if they want to follow him. And how the Lord blessed the brother of Jared because of the length of time and diligence he spent in prayer. Powerful lesson I think we can learn from that. Here's a few questions to consider just as I close. And just to read some of these to you. The first one is, what do the brother of Jared's prayers teach us about praying for others, especially in times of uncertainty? Or just a powerful principle that the brother of Jared is, specifically praying for his family and for other people this whole time. A lot of things to be learned from brother Jared here. What does the Jaredites' journey teach us about the importance of preparing both physically and spiritually for challenges ahead? Why is it significant that God promises the Jaredites a choice land above all others? And what might that signify about his covenant relationship with them? And what does this lengthy genealogy in Ether 1 suggest about the importance of preserving our spiritual or family history? Really, really cool concept there. Just think about family history in our own lives and how we can preserve our own family history, just as Moroni has decided to with Ether. And what can we personally learn from the brother of Jared's willingness to approach God repeatedly in faith? How can this apply to our own lives with our repeated petitions before the Lord? How can we prepare to receive revelation the way that the brother of Jared, the way that Jared and his brother did? This is also really important. President Nelson's always stressed that we need to learn how to receive personal revelation for ourselves. And so what can we learn from the way they received revelation to apply to our own lives? So those are just a couple questions to think about. I hope everybody is having a great week, a great time with Come Follow Me. But yeah, you're welcome to answer these questions in the comments or to give any feedback on what you think about this. But these are just some of my thoughts about Ether Chapter 1. And I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see y'all later.